In the world of comic books, where superheroes with extraordinary powers dominate, one character has long stood as a symbol of the everyday soldier, Sergeant Frank Rock. In the pantheon of American heroes, Sergeant Rock stands as a unique figure, embodying the bravery and grit of the common soldier during World War II. Created by writer and editor Robert Kanigher and artist Joe Kubert, Rock first marched onto the scene in 1959 in Our Army at War number 83, the comic book series published by DC Comics. Set against the grim backdrop of the European theater of operations during World War II, Sergeant Rock and his company, Easy Company, battled their way through a myriad of perilous missions. Rock was a grizzled, cigar-chomping sergeant who led his men with sheer tenacity and a deep sense of duty. Kanigher and Kubert, drawing from their own experiences and the stories of veterans, crafted a character who was as real as ink and paper could make him. While Sergeant Rock did not achieve the same level of mainstream cultural impact as iconic superheroes like Superman or Batman, he became a beloved figure among comic book enthusiasts, especially those who appreciated the nuanced depiction of wartime experiences. The rights to turn the title into a feature-length live-action film were purchased in the 1980s by Hollywood producer Joel Silver. Silver had already established himself as a powerhouse in the industry by this point. He had produced Commando, starring Arnold Schwarzenegger, and he would follow this with the blockbuster Lethal Weapon. Screenwriter David Webb Peoples, whose credits included Blade Runner, was hired to adapt the source material into a screenplay. Silver was looking to reunite with Schwarzenegger as his star and co-producer on Sergeant Rock. The character's origin was rewritten to be an American soldier of German descent, and the first draft was turned over to Warner Brothers in August of 1987. Schwarzenegger was fitted for costume, promotional pin badges were handed out at conventions, and following script revisions by Commando and The Running Man writer Steven D'Souza, a September 1988 start date was announced. John McTiernan, the director of Predator and Die Hard, was on board to direct, and everything seemed good to go. Until Arnold found out that the movie was to shoot on location in the former Yugoslavia, and not near his new home in Idaho as he was allegedly promised. And just like that, the whole thing went up in smoke. A decade came and went, and in 1997, Silver sent the original Webb Peoples draft to Quentin Tarantino. Tarantino was at a stage in his career where he was unsure if he would ever direct a script by another writer, as this would mean a diversion into becoming a director for hire rather than an auteur. But he was a comic book fan, and he was a fan of war movies, and he very much enjoyed the script, of which many years later he would always repeat that it was quote-unquote really terrific. Tarantino was never a fan of Sergeant Rock growing up. Instead, as a Marvel fan, he collected issues of Sergeant Fury and his Howling Commandos, which he saw as being Marvel's version of Sergeant Rock. Tarantino didn't reply to Silver, but he did spend a couple of weeks exploring the possibility. He put together a potential dream cast in his mind and considered this as something that he said could have been a potential classic. The story that Webb Peoples wrote that impressed Tarantino so much is a harrowing depiction of the brutal realities of war, blending intense action with moments of reflection, camaraderie, and the psychological toll on soldiers. The script unfolds against the gritty backdrop of World War II in 1943, centered around the experiences of Sergeant Frank Rock, a tough, resourceful American soldier leading his men through the harrowing landscapes of Italy in the heart of enemy territory. The narrative kicks off with a tense scene in a small Italian village under the moonlight, where Nazi soldiers interrogate a frightened peasant woman. This tension breaks as Rock, disguised as a German corporal, kills the Nazi officer and initiates a brutal firefight. Rock's squad, consisting of hardened soldiers, swiftly joins the fray, defeating the Nazis and taking prisoners. Following the skirmish, the soldiers reflect on Rock's unorthodox and risky tactics, with Retread, a seasoned soldier, voicing concerns over Rock's penchant for taking unnecessary risks. This concern is echoed when the scene shifts to an Italian villa, where Major Pritchard, the battalion commander, dismisses Rock's warnings about the presence of elite Waffen-SS troops. Pritchard's arrogance leads to a deadly artillery strike on the villa, causing significant casualties and leaving Rock's fate uncertain. In a nearby cellar, the soldiers anxiously debate whether Rock has survived, their emotions raw and fraught with the fear of losing their leader. Meanwhile, Rock is severely injured and on the brink of death, only saved by the determined efforts of a medic named O'Hara. The story briefly flashes back to Rock's pre-war life in Akron, Ohio, where he was a young man facing harassment due to his German heritage. Amidst the chaos, a new commanding officer, Lieutenant Gorel, unexpectedly arrives, taking charge. He informs them that Sergeant Rock is alive. The soldiers are skeptical, but begin to follow Gorel's orders. Back in the war zone, Rock regains consciousness in a hospital, disoriented and suffering from partial amnesia. He learns that he narrowly escaped death and has been unconscious for 2 weeks. Haunted by memories of O'Hara, who is now missing, Rock's determination to find him sets the stage for his return to the battlefield. Rock reunites with his comrades and is thrown back into the chaos of war. Rock infiltrates a German position, kills the enemy soldiers, and takes their weapons. Before leaving, he has a tense conversation with an injured German soldier, who reveals that tanks are coming. Rock dismisses the threat, saying they can handle tanks. As Rock slips away, the injured German alerts his comrades, putting our heroes in danger. The scene then shifts to Gorel and his men, who realize they are lost in the woods, causing doubt among the soldiers about Gorel's leadership. As the narrative progresses, the soldiers are depicted enduring the grim realities of war, harrowing battles, deadly ambushes, and the constant threat of death. In one particularly epic and intense sequence, Rock and his team navigate a dangerous snowy landscape. Rock and his men are struggling to navigate through a snowstorm while being surrounded by the loud engines of approaching tanks. They find themselves in a life-or-death situation, forced to dodge multiple tanks that appear suddenly through the thick snow. Rock narrowly avoids being crushed, and even throws a grenade at one tank, which continues on, seemingly unfazed. The group takes cover in a hut, but a tank destroys it with a direct hit, forcing them to scramble for safety amidst the debris. As the tanks get closer, Rock and his men struggle to rescue a trapped comrade, Bigelow, just as a tank looms dangerously close. Miraculously, a bazooka fired by an unseen group of soldiers destroys the tank, saving them at the last moment. These soldiers, identified as members of Baker Company, make a heroic stand against the German tanks, expertly using their bazooka to disable them. Later, Rock and his group move cautiously through the woods, realizing that these Baker soldiers are the ones who saved them. The Baker Company soldiers, despite being a small and battered group, manage to block a pass by causing a landslide, effectively stopping the German tanks from advancing. Rock is deeply impressed by their bravery and skill. Rock and Gorel discuss their next move as they find themselves outnumbered by the enemy. Rock proposes a risky plan to snipe at the Germans, which could give their comrades, Baker's team, some time to retreat. Gorel hesitantly agrees, recognizing the heroism of their comrades. Gorel relays the request for volunteers to the other soldiers. Characters Wildman, Kluzowiecki, and Pascalano agree to join the Rock. The group carefully navigates down a steep slope to ambush the Germans. During the ensuing firefight, they manage to kill several Germans, but the situation remains tense. Wildman bravely crawls out onto an overhanging rock to drop a grenade on the Germans below, shouting a dedication to a fallen comrade. He successfully drops the grenade, but as he prepares to throw another, a malfunction causes it to explode prematurely, severely injuring him. The team scrambles to help Wildman while continuing to fend off the Germans. Gorel and his group, observing the situation from above, realize that the Germans are trying to outflank Rock's position. Gorel hesitates, but ultimately decides to lead his men down to ambush the Germans. Despite their fear and uncertainty, Gorel's group successfully surprises the Germans, killing them and securing the area. The story's climax would truly make for breathtaking cinema as we revolve around a series of desperate, bloody encounters as Rock and his men struggle to survive against relentless German forces. The soldiers are depicted in foxholes, battling not just the enemy, but also their own delirious fears and hallucinations, dealing with exhaustion and the eerie environment. The soldiers are on edge, with both real and imagined dangers surrounding them. The focus returns to the battlefield, where Sergeant Rock and his men realize that a group of soldiers, possibly Baker's unit, are still holding off the Germans in a fierce fight involving tanks and bazookas. They witness the heroic efforts of these soldiers, which boosts their morale as they face relentless German attacks, including a bombing run by Stuka planes. During the firefight, Retread, one of Sergeant Rock's men, is shot and dies from his wounds. Gorel leads his exhausted men through the woods, retreating from the battle. They witness an aerial dogfight where American Thunderbolt planes shoot down enemy German aircraft, giving the soldiers a moment of hope and joy. Meanwhile, Sergeant Rock is engaged in a fierce battle, surrounded by German soldiers. Despite running low and being wounded, Rock fights off several Germans. He cleverly uses misdirection and a dud grenade to outmaneuver his enemies. Rock resolutely defends his position, continuing the fight as his team moves on. Eventually, Rock is engaged in a brutal hand-to-hand fight with a German soldier named Horst. Despite being severely beaten, Rock manages to kill Horst by smashing his head against a rock. Just as Rock is about to collapse from exhaustion, he is approached by Sergeant Steele, a large, battle-hardened African-American soldier from Baker Company. Steele helps Rock, bandaging his wounds and offering to fight alongside him. They discuss their respective units and decide to press on together as the rear guard, under the cover of friendly aircraft. Rock and Steele are dealing with the aftermath of a fierce battle. Rock finds his pack riddled with bullet holes, and Steele talks about his fondness for German binoculars and Lugers, while also sharing the grim reality that German soldiers often torture black soldiers found with Lugers. The two men discuss a fallen comrade, Wildman, whom they thought was dead, but miraculously he is still alive thanks to a mysterious red-haired medic. The scene shifts to a group of soldiers from Easy Company, who are informed by Pritchard that, due to a mix-up, they will be sharing a truck with black soldiers from Baker Company. Despite initial awkwardness, humor breaks the tension, and the men bond over their shared wounds and experiences. As the scene progresses, Rock and Steele carry Wildman back through the battlefield, reflecting on the surprising resilience of ordinary men turned soldiers. They spot the red-haired medic, O'Hara, moving into enemy territory, but he quickly disappears into the smoke. The screenplay ends with the looming question from Steele about whether they will ever win the war. Tarantino ultimately decided that he wouldn't accept the offer to bring Sergeant Rock to the big screen, and would instead work on his own original characters. Silver remained attached to the adaptation, and over the next 25 years, new scripts by John Milius, Brian Helgeland, John Cox, and Chad St. John were written. Director Guy Ritchie and then France Lawrence were linked, but still the property stayed on the shelf, where it remains as of today. The closest we came to seeing the project greenlit was when Ritchie was simultaneously working his own Sergeant Rock script alongside a remake of The Dirty Dozen for Silver and Warner Brothers. However, in an ironic twist of fate, the announcement of Tarantino's own World War II movie, Inglorious Basterds, entering production, meant that there wasn't enough room in the marketplace for more than one war epic. Joel Silver told the press, quote, "Guy did a great job on the script for Sergeant Rock, and I think that when Inglorious Basterds was coming together so quickly, it made sense to kind of jump off that and jump onto Sherlock Holmes, because it was something that was really different and unique. I love to think that one day we will make Sergeant Rock. Inglorious Basterds is a war movie, and I'm looking forward to seeing it, but it's something that was a direct competition to Sergeant Rock, so I felt that we should hold off and do that when we can." As Tarantino would regularly speak of his love for the original Sergeant Rock script, Silver would comment, quote, "I never was a Quentin Tarantino fan. I'm not a Quentin Tarantino fan. I don't love what he does. I think his pastiche and parody is not what I think is cool, but a lot of people love what he does. I like the last one, Django Unchained. But I sent him Sergeant Rock and never heard back. And then heard years later that he'd actually read it and made cast list and wanted to make the movie. And then he said, 'Why do I want to make that? I'll just make my own.' That evolved into Inglorious Basterds. I tried for years to make Rock. I couldn't get that off the ground." And so, in a parallel universe out there somewhere, Quentin Tarantino did make a big screen, big budget, epic Sergeant Rock comic book movie. But sadly, for the inhabitants of our universe, he didn't. Thanks for watching.